How's it going, guys? Welcome to the podcast. I know you've been hearing YouTubers, podcasters, and all these Instagram people telling you for years to follow and subscribe and pay to their Patreon and all these different things for years now. But I just want to say that a simple subscribe, which takes maybe 3 to 5 seconds max, does genuinely make a monster-sized difference to us creators. For someone like me, it's just more ammo to pitch into an email to send to these people and their teams to help them come on the show and provide value to them. So honestly, just a little subscribe makes a monster difference and it really, really helps out. So if you do enjoy the episode today, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button. It makes a massive difference. I'm not going to take up any more of your time. Enjoy the episode. Let's get going. Charlie, how you doing today? Welcome to the show.
Louis, I'm just living the dream, man. Having a great time in life.
I can tell. Look at you. You look so good, and I've seen all the stuff that you're doing, and wow, it's just beautiful to see. And so we can just introduce everyone to you and get an idea of what you get up to and what you've done in kind of a condensed little, 30 to 60 seconds sort of elevator pitch. Just a quick intro into the life of you. So what you've done, what you do, what your day job is, and just kind of give us a snapshot into what you're all about. And then we're going to go into those questions.
Absolutely. Farm kid from Kansas in the USA. I'd never seen the ocean, never ridden in an airplane. I'd never been out of the 4 states of Kansas, Nebraska, Iowa, Missouri. Got an appointment to the Naval Academy. Had no idea what they did at Annapolis. But I went out there for 4 years, married my high school sweetheart, got into flight training and was assigned the hottest airplane in the world, the F-4 Phantom jet. Went out to San Diego, helped start the Top Gun school out there, launched on the aircraft carrier Kitty Hawk, flew 74 successful combat missions. And with 4 days from going home, I was shot down, captured by the enemy, tortured, and spent the next 2,103 days in communist prison camps. So at the end of that, I stayed in the Navy, as most guys did, continued to fly jets for the Navy off aircraft carriers, and wrote a book and started speaking. And so my career now is spreading the word about resilience and grit and how you overcome the challenges of your life.
Too right.
Married to a wonderful lady, have 4 kids and 4 grandkids. And so that all keeps me busy.
Fantastic. Wow. I mean, there is just so much to unpack there, and I just can't wait to dig into it. But I think the best place really to start in a story like yours is just in the backstory then. So, what drew you initially towards the Naval Academy? Where did the aviation passion come from? Just kind of run us through that early part of your life and career getting in. Was it a family thing, the whole flying thing, or was it just an entire you thing?
It was pretty much an entire me. As I grew up in the cornfields of Kansas, I would look up in the sky and I would see these Piper Cubs, flying around, and think to myself, boy, I wonder if I can ever ride in one of those airplanes. And so the Navy gave me the opportunity, but I had no idea from my young age that I would ever be able to fly jet fighters at the speed of sound. So it was it's kind of a funny thing in life how many crossroads you come to, and one crossroad would lead one way and one the other, and I've had a lot of lucky crossroads in my life.
Right. It certainly seems like it. And so you got in, and then obviously the legendary Top Gun, you went over there, and you said something in the intro there about kind of starting that up too. So I guess talk me through that then. So when did you go? What course did you go through? Was it the adversary course? Which one was it? And what was it like?
This is at the very, very beginning. It was before anybody ever called anything Top Gun. I got my Navy wings at age 20, I guess I was 22, and was assigned this high-altitude supersonic interceptor, the F-4 Phantom jet. This airplane was designed during the Cold War as an airplane which would climb to high altitudes. We set the altitude records. We could go to 80,000 feet. In fact, I trained in a spacesuit so we could go that high. The whole idea was our adversary, we thought, was the high altitude Russian bombers. And so We were to launch off the aircraft carrier, fly it over 50,000 feet, engage the Russian bombers, make a slow turn, come back to the aircraft carrier. They never taught us to dogfight. Well, so I got my wings with a buddy, Paul Krukey, and Paul and I went out to Miramar to start flying this beautiful new airplane. There was a 6-month wait for flying. We were really bummed out because we couldn't fly this great airplane. So we're wandering down the flight line and ran into an instrument training squadron that was using the same airplanes that we had flown in flight training, the F-9 Cougar. This is it's a swept-wing airplane. It's a jet, but it's slow and it's light, but it's very maneuverable. And so Paul and I signed on to take these students out in these very boring flights of just drilling around the skies, not making any big turns or anything else. But we would save a few hundred pounds of jet fuel, and we would lurch off the coast of San Diego. When the F-4 Phantoms came out, we would pounce on these guys in a dogfight, and we would wipe them out every time because they didn't know how to do this. So after one very successful mission, Paul and I came back to the ready room, and on the bulletin board, it says, Plumb and Krukey report to the commanding officer of the F-4 squadron immediately. So here's these two young guys in sweaty flight suits and bloody eyeballs. That's what's happening, when you get into a dogfight, get really bloody eyeballs and sweaty flight suits. And we're knocking on the door to the commanding officer of the F-4 squadron. Come in. We open the door, and there he sits, okay? This behind his desk. He's looking over the top of his readers, old guy, 32, 30, 33, old guy. and so, you the two guys out there in the F-9s? Yes, sir, we were. Did you follow an F-4 through an entire loop? Yes, sir, we did. Did you have your guns trained on that F-4 the entire time? Yes, sir. He said, do you know who was in that F-4? We thought we were toast. We thought we'd court-martial us. He said, you do know that's illegal. Yes, sir, we do. He said, I just came back from Vietnam. He said, you look an awful lot like MiGs back there. We don't know how to fight this airplane against MiGs. How about coming out tomorrow and fight with us again? For the next 6 months, Paul Krukey and I had the ideal job, because we're just out there dogfighting with these Phantoms. And that was the way Top Gun got started, because the airplane was built as a supersonic interceptor, not a dogfighting airplane. And so that was the whole idea of Top Gun, and it worked. Well, it became a syllabus within that replacement air group, and then rolled into its own squadron, and then later on, obviously, it became Top Gun.
So when did it actually get the name?
How it all began.
How did that name come about then, and what was it originally called?
It was called Navy Fighter Weapons School. And in fact, it still is today. It's called Navy Fighter Weapons School. I think it's Tom Cruise that named it Top Gun. But it wasn't called Top Gun when I was there.
My God. Oh, wow. What an incredible backstory. I never knew that. I've got to ask then, so you did so many, obviously, kind of aerobatic things there and dogfighting and everything. I remember the first time I ever went out in a fighter and did a loop or a roll, and it was, I wouldn't say it's like the defining moment of my life, but it was one of those moments I will never forget. So do you remember your first moment when you went upside down and you were looking up at the ground?
We got that early on in flight training. In fact, the first plane I ever soloed was a T-34 Mentor. It's a propeller airplane, and they taught us loops and spins and barrel rolls and all of the aerobatics, because you really need to know how to put that airplane in those upside down maneuvers in case you get into weather, in case you get into turbulence, and if the plane starts responding weird, or if you get shot up, as I did in the war. I got shot up and the airplane wouldn't fly normally. And so you have to know how to maneuver the airplane in these erratic positions. And so that's the whole idea. And so in flight training, just in Navy flight training, you learn to fly the same formation that they fly over the Blue Angels. We don't fly as close as the Blues, but we fly 4 ships in flight training and do all the maneuvers that the Blue Angels do, just because it's good flight training.
Yeah, makes sense. So in all of that then, so you obviously started out there. When was the first time you ever got to sit in an F-4 Phantom? What was it like?
Well, it was amazing. It was amazing. Now, we had simulators, and so I had, I'd seen the simulators, and so I knew the switchology, but just the whole idea of the cockpit was so complicated to me, far more complicated than anything I'd ever flown. Of course, we could go supersonic. We had afterburners, which was pretty terrific. We could go higher and faster and climb faster than about any airplane on the planet. And so the Phantom was really, really cool. Now, one of the ironies it was in the Navy, we had a backseater, a guy in a back seat, but he had no control of the airplane. So your instructor, when your first flight in the Phantom, your instructor was in the back seat to talk to you, but he had no control of the airplane. So the first time out, with this new instructor in the back, he'd been to Vietnam and he'd come back and he was a pretty well trained instructor. So he's in the back seat, I'm in the front seat. We're over an undercast. We're like 45,000 feet, and we got the clouds all below us. All right. And he said, "Okay, you want to go supersonic?" I said, "Sure." Say, "Well, tap the afterburners and we'll go supersonic." And so I tapped the afterburners, but it's twin engine, and I got one engine in the afterburner, but the other one was not. And so the airplane skidded off to the side and blanked out one of the intakes, and the engine quit. Okay, so I'm on single engine. Well, at 45,000 feet, you can't restart that engine. The air's not thick enough up there to restart the engine. And so we start coming down, and we're coming through this cloud deck. Well, my poor flight instructor back, I can almost feel his hands coming around to choke me, because I'd screwed up. But we made it down through the cloud deck and broke out at about 17,000 feet, and I restarted the left engine, and we made a normal landing. And then I took him to the bar, and I bought him, I think, like 5 straight gin and tonics. Poor guy.
Oh my God.
That was what flight training was all about.
So when did Top Gun get some structure then? So it kind of sounds like it came it was given birth to almost from the idea of let's go do some dogfighting. So when did it start to get kind of a training curriculum? How did that look when you actually started kind of making it an actual school, basically?
Well, the story that I told you then developed into the RAG, Replacement Air Group, then developed this syllabus. And so it was just part of the replacement training of the F-4 Phantom. And that was in 1966. It broke off, I believe it was 1968, when it actually formed its own squadron. And they, in fact, they operated out of a trailer there at Miramar in San Diego. And they weren't given very much money to operate with. And so they were just a kind of a ragtag bunch of guys there that were learning to dogfight in this airplane. And so the Navy Fighter Weapons School actually, I think, is late 60s. Now, of course, I was gone, so I knew nothing about this until I came home from the prison camp. So I was shot down in 1967, and I came home in 1973. So it was during that period of time, of course, pretty much lost on me because I had no news from home in that prison camp, and so it was between that time frame of 66 to 73 that Top Gun became the Navy Fighter Weapons School.
Guys, just to let you know, Talk4 Podcast is on Patreon, and it also has a Spotify subscription too. So guys, if you are really enjoying the show and you enjoy all the past episodes too, and you just want to pitch in just a tiny amount every month, even just a couple of pounds a month or something to support the show, help me get better guests on and keep upgrading and upgrading what we're doing here, please do consider heading over there and just giving me some support. It means a massive amount. Guys, back to the episode now. Enjoy. See, wow, that's some really interesting backstory right there. Damn. So obviously, looking at your stuff and the website and the engagements you do, the bulk of this talk really, I think, is going to have to be about your story of that 75th mission then and what happened. So I was kind of wondering if basically, can you explain to us what happened, how it happened, and just kind of put us in your shoes a bit from the start of that day to the end of it, and then we'll go forward from there.
Sure. Let me tell you about the night before, which was kind of interesting, and I think has some principles involved. Um, we had 5 days from the end of our tour of duty, and so everybody was pretty excited about going home. And so a bunch of us got together in the ready room in the aircraft carrier, and we'd watch the movie and laugh and scratch and drink coffee and tell lies to each other, and things that fighter pilots do. And as I recall, there were 7 of us there in a little circle. And one guy showed up. He was the technocrat. He would show up with his little handheld computer. He would have prefigured the probability that any one of us would be shot down and captured the next day. Real popular guy. But
Yeah,
it was all for
there's
fun.
always one. There's always one.
Oh, it was just a joke, you know. And so we passed that around. Hey, Joe, you're looking pretty good there. You got a .0093. Charlie, you better watch it. It's a .037, and we'd laugh. And then the conversation made a kind of a serious turn. And I don't know why. Maybe it was because we were so close to the end of our tour of duty. Maybe we'd lost about a fourth of our pilots killed or captured by that time. But the conversation took a serious turn, and we began to ask each other, "Hey, what happens? What happens if you get shot down tomorrow?" And to a man, I believe everyone, 7 guys, admitted to the other 6. I don't think I'd make it, guys. I've heard about the disease and the torture and the bad food. And if I'm shot down and captured tomorrow, send my stuff back to my wife and tell her to get on with her life, because this is a mountain too high to climb. Every guy there felt that being a prisoner of war was worse than being killed in action. It was kind of crazy. But so there I was. The next morning, it was a bright and early job for me. Probably 3 o'clock in the morning, I get this phone call in my stateroom. We got an Alpha strike going on. Alpha was the highest level of strike that we could put on the enemy. We had 3 aircraft carriers and 5 Air Force bases, and every plane we had descending on the targets in North Vietnam. So it was a big deal. So I went to the radio room, got on my flight suit, got ready to go. I have a co-pilot, my backseater, a radar intercept officer, and we took off from the aircraft carrier, rendezvoused at about 20,000 feet, plugged into an airborne tanker to take on some extra fuel, and pointed the airplane towards the beach and the war. And just short of the target, we were hit by a surface-to-air missile. A SAM, surface-to-air missile, exploded with some 12,000 pounds of jet fuel. Sent that big bird. This is a big airplane. It's 52 feet long and weighed about 35, 40,000 pounds at that time. Topsy-turvy, end over end, down towards the rice paddy below. I ejected, my co-pilot ejected, our parachutes opened, and we came floating down over enemy territory. So in hanging in the parachute, as I'd been trained, I looked up and I counted the panels of my parachute. I looked down at the unknown, and they're shooting at me. The audacity, I thought, of the enemy. They've just knocked down my multi-gazillion-dollar airplane. Now they're trying to kill the pilot. That's not fair. And so I'm dodging bullets. Okay, they're snapping past my ears. So I bowed my head and said a prayer, asked for a little strength from above. And then I prayed for my wife, the lady I had married under the Arch of Swords after the Naval Academy. This is going to be a tough war for her. And in fact, as it turned out, I believe that the war was tougher on our families than it was on us. We always knew we were alive in that prison camp. We were confident we were going home and be, better than ever. And our wives never knew from one day to the next if we'd ever come home, and if we did, would be a burden to them the rest of their lives. So with that, I fell into a rice paddy, about waist deep in the mud of a rice paddy, descended upon by a bunch of the enemy, stripped me of everything I had. They took my flight gear, my clothing, my personal possessions. They even took my name. They gave me a name from their language just to humiliate me for the next nearly 6 years. dragged me around village to village, camp to camp, and finally into Hanoi, the capital city, where I was tortured for 2 days with ropes and irons and whips. And then I was tossed into a little prison cell. It was 8 feet long and 8 feet wide. I'll never forget that cell. I could pace 3 steps in one direction, turn around and pace 3 steps the other. And I spent thousands of miles pacing the floor of that little prison cell. Well, I was pretty beat up. I was bleeding from 4 open wounds, no medical care at all. I was getting pretty skinny those first few months, down to about 120 pounds, and I weighed 175 when I was shot down. And I was developing these boils. We never really understood where they came from, but he had all these big old ugly carbuncle boils all over our body, all over our face. I was existing on 2 bowls of rice a day and maybe a little broth sometimes. That was my physical state, and that, believe it or not, Louis, was the good news. The bad news was my mental state. I had given up. I had surrendered. Surrender is not in the Top Gun playbook. You're not trained to give up, and I had, and I felt very ashamed of that. I felt very guilty. It was really kind of weird because, and I'm thinking, how can I ever go home and face my fellow fighter pilots? How can I ever even face my family? And admit that I was so weak that I gave in to the enemy. So I'm pacing along with that shame and guilt and depression, and heard in the far corner the chirping noise of a cricket. I walked over to check it out, and it was no cricket. It was scratching on the floor. I was a wire, scratching on the floor, making this chirping noise. And the wire was coming through a hole at the base of that cell wall. And I looked at the wire, and I thought, I don't think it's the enemy. They're not sophisticated enough to try to trick me. So it's got to be another American. If it's an American, it also has to be a fighter pilot. This is an air war over North Vietnam. We're being shot down and captured. I knew it was a prison camp full of pilots. My first thought was, boy, I would sure like to talk to another pilot. Sure lonely in here. And man, we could tell some stories and maybe know some of the same people. And my second thought was, I don't want anybody to see me in my weakened state, especially another fighter pilot. If that's another fighter pilot on the end of that wire, he's probably older than I am, probably better pilot than I am, probably tougher. He probably didn't spill his guts to the enemy. And so I'm losing interest now. I'm thinking I just really don't want to expose my tender underbelly to anybody, least of all one of my peers. So I crawled back in the corner of the prison cell and decided just to wait. If this war takes 2 or 3 years, I'll just wait it out, and I won't have to talk to anybody. And the wire kept scratching on the floor, and I kept sweating because I was afraid that the guards would hear and come in and catch whoever was on the end of that wire trying to communicate. So I finally went over and I tugged on the wire, and it tugged back, and I tugged again, and it disappeared right back through that rat hole. The wire came back about an hour later. This time the wire had a note wrapped around the end of it. The note was written on a dirty piece of toilet paper, just blobs on this wadded up piece of toilet paper. I could barely make it out, but it said, memorize this code. It had the code. Then eat this note. I did it. I memorized the code. I ate the note. The code is a 5x5 matrix of the alphabet, 5 lines, 5 rows. A, B, C, D, E, then F, G, H, I, J. We left out K to make it come out 5x5. Numbers down the side, across the top, indicating any letter would be represented by 2 numbers, number of the line, then the number of the row. A, first line, first row, 1 tug, 1 more tug. Very cumbersome code, as you might imagine, but it worked. It was a lifesaver. It was absolutely life and death, being able to communicate with somebody else in that prison camp, and especially one of your peers. So on the other end of the wire was Lieutenant Commander Bob Shoemaker. Here's an interesting thought. He had orders to NASA. He was going to be an astronaut when he was shot down. He was shot down 2 years before I was. The guy spent 8 years in a prison camp. But he spent a good long number of hours, weeks, months piecing together little bits of wire, stuffing them out a hole in his cell wall across a storeroom between our two prison cells. He fished that wire over the boxes, around the shovels, through the ropes, into the little hole in my cell wall, 14 feet away. Unbelievable. Just to contact another pilot and just to give me some encouragement. Don't think I'd be alive today if it hadn't been for Bob Shoemaker, who went to all that trouble just to contact another pilot.
Wow.
He said, "How you doing, buddy?" And this code. I said, "I'm doing terrible, buddy." What do you expect? And I start blaming everybody. Blame the president for starting this war. Blame the mechanics to put the airplane together. Blame the enemy. They're torturing prisoners. I'm not supposed to be doing that. Blame the Congress. They bought the airplane, not my airplane. I'm blaming all these people for my problems. And he said, the problem is when you start blaming other people for your problems, you give away control of your life. Said, you got a choice. You can be the victim, sure, and you'll probably die here. Or you can find out some value in this experience. He said, and there's great value in this prisoner experience. And you are destined to find out that value. And it worked. It was really amazing how that first communication, and then the leadership that we had in the prison camp, and the teamwork that we put together with guys you couldn't even see, you couldn't hear. You were just communicating with them on this really rudimentary code, and yet we put together the best team I've ever played on. Is the prisoners of war in that prison camp.
That's just incredible. What a story. I have to ask then two questions really, but what was the worst part of that? I mean, all of it. And the second part to that too is, you said that you gave up, but do you think you could have prevented that if you had to go back there now and do that all over again? Is there something you would have done differently to have kept your morale higher and to have not given up? Or do you think that was inevitable in the circumstances?
I think it was inevitable because I thought I was strong enough. That night before, when we all pledged that we would never give up, we'd never be prisoners of war, we'd kill ourselves first. And so I really wasn't expecting the pain. And so the physical pain was the worst part, but the mental anguish was probably worse than the physical pain. The whole idea, that you've got 24/7 with nothing to do. I mean, 6 years with no books to read, no window to look out, no TV to talk on, nobody to talk to. Now, eventually they gave me a roommate and then another one. And at one point I was in the same cell with 57 guys. It was a small cell. We had 14 inches of bed space, and it wasn't supposed to work that way, but we'd made a raid on one of the Green Berets came over, and they made a raid on one of the prison camps on the outlying camps. And so the enemy was so afraid, and so they put us all back into the main prison camp we called the Hanoi Hilton in downtown Hanoi, the capital city. Well, there wasn't enough room for us there, but they felt that was the safest place for us to be because, that the U.S. might make another raid on a smaller camp, but they probably felt like that they wouldn't raid a camp in the middle of Hanoi. And so we were forced into a cell that was about 20 feet wide and about 30 feet long, and we had 14 inches of bed space. But we were together for the first time, and it was a wonderful just to be with guys you could look at, talk to, trade stories.
How did you get over that initial shame then? What were they like receiving you? Were they in the same boat? And, how critical was it? And I want people to listen into this though, but how critical was it to have the team, and how did that kind of help you manage the physical aspect and the torture and stuff that I imagine you were pulled together, did you?
Absolutely. It was, again, I don't think I'd be alive if it hadn't had the communication, had put that team together, because we were so supportive of everybody. And when you'd be taken out to the torture room, and be beaten up and come back bloody, and the guys were right there to patch you up and encourage you, and tell you it's going to be all right. And because we were all going through the same thing, if it was somebody else getting beat up today, it was going to be your turn tomorrow. And so the communication, and then the team we put together, and the leadership, that was so vital, that we had leaders that turned this whole thing around. And in fact, that the first guy I talked to, Bob Shoemaker, on the end of that wire, he said we have we have a leadership hierarchy, just like the military. You have a direct report. We have a senior officer, and our senior officers have decided this: we are not on the defensive here. And I'm looking around that late foot, bite foot prison cell. I'm thinking, wait a minute, my best friends are rats and snakes in here, and bugs and mosquitoes, and I'm not on the defensive. He said, no. He said, our leadership tells us this: you are warriors. You were pledged to this job. You have pledged to defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, and this is one of them. So pull up your big boy pants. We got a war to fight. And it turned the whole thing around. And statistically, here's something that your viewers and listeners would be interested in. A study was done 8 or 10 years ago of all the combatants of Vietnam. 30.6% have PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. And as you pointed out in some of your other podcasts, we got over 20 suicides a day from these veterans. They all came home with these real bad. A third of them with psychological problems. Of the prisoners of war, 4% have PTSD. And it's mostly the guys shot down near the end of the war. We're only there for a few weeks or a month or two. We're not tortured. You kept their own clothes. They're the ones that have the psychological problems. And I'm no psychiatrist or psychologist, but I kind of really believe it was the leadership that we had telling us that we were on the offensive, that we had a war to fight, that they gave us a purpose, far more than just survival. They gave us a purpose to live by, and a purpose to rally around. And so it was that leadership and that team and that purpose, I think, that really, in fact, today we are the poster boys for what's called PTG, post-traumatic growth. The whole idea, that you can come out of a tough situation and be better and stronger because you had some adversity in your life. And in fact, that's one of the things that I do. I speak all over the world, and about this PTG, post-traumatic growth. And you don't have to be a prisoner of war to figure this out. Anybody that goes through a divorce or cancer or any challenge in life, if you look at it closely enough, you can figure out there's value in this challenge. So that communication and that leadership and that teamwork that I learned over there served me well then and continues to serve me well today.
Wow. So much to unpack there. But I think what I really want to ask then is, I'd love to get into, the after effects a bit more then and dig into that too. But I have to ask then, so in terms of what you took into that place and what you left with, what do you feel like was the most important thing that you entered there with mentally and equipped you with from the Naval Academy? So what served you the best from there in that situation? And then on the opposite side of that, what was the most valuable lesson do you feel like you learned in that situation too? Was it the teamwork? Was it the leadership? What was it for you?
All of the above. I learned in grade school from a coach. After a very losing season, we lost the last game of the season, and the coach was a veteran. And I'm wandering off to the locker room, head hung down, being very depressed. And the coach is coming up from behind. He had shrapnel in his leg from his war, and he walked with a limp. But he caught up with me, and I felt his arm over my sweaty shoulder. And I looked at the coach and I said, I'm sorry, coach. I guess this team's just a bunch of losers. The coach squeezed my shoulder and he sunk his fingernails into the flesh. And he said, son, whether you think you're a loser or whether you think you're a winner, you're right. He says, it's all a thought process. He said, life is a choice. Every day of your life is a beautiful choice. You can choose to be a victim or you can choose to be a victor. And in the Naval Academy, I learned a lot there. I got a degree in engineering and learned how to sail boats around the Chesapeake Bay. But our superintendent, we call him the Soup, Admiral Charles Kirkpatrick, would stand up in front of the big pep rallies before the football games, and he would clench his fist. You could see the veins running his brow, and he would say, you guys can do anything you set your minds to do. Was it hype? Yeah. Did it work? It worked. Those 4 years, the Naval Academy took a ragtag football team and were national champions because he told us we could do anything we set our minds to do. So what did I learn? I validated that in the prison camp. This whole thing is a mental game. Yes, I was encased in an 8-foot by 8-foot prison cell, but the real prison was the 8 inches between my ears. This was going to be a mental game. And I was going to be able to decide my fate in that 8-inch prison.
Is all of life a mental game then, do you think?
Yep. It's all mental. It really is.
So then how do you win that game?
I am convinced. How do you win the game?
Yeah.
Well, several principles for winning the mental game. First of all, you have to keep a positive attitude. You have to believe that there's value in adversity. And in fact, one of the things I tell my audience is adversity is a horrible thing to waste. The whole idea that you can take a bad situation in life and find something positive within that situation. And a coach said, you don't win or lose, you win or learn. And I think that's the whole idea, is that if you can look at any situation in life as being very negative, and you can get into a pity party and blame everybody you can think of and feel sorry for yourself and get into a bushel of pity on yourself. Or you can stand up and say, hey, how can I refigure this negative experience into something positive for me? And I think that's what my whole life is all about, is turning negative into positive.
So doing that is something that sounds incredibly profound and important to do on a day-to-day basis, but I think everyone can vouch for the fact that obviously completely not comparable what you went through to what people go through in the small world problems nowadays. But when you're having a bad day, sometimes you just don't want to. You want to be in that rut and you do things that take you further into it. So I guess from what people can learn from this story, how did you get yourself out of those really bad moments mentally? What was the process for that? Did you have kind of self-talk? Did you speak to yourself? Did you rely on your leader? Or did you speak to your friends? What were you doing there that helped you in the worst days?
This guy, Bob Shoemaker, that passed the wire through the hole in the wall, would send me patriotic quotes and lyrics to songs and Bible verses and things to motivate and inspire me. And one of the poems that he sent me really made a lot of difference in my life. And it was this: acid does more harm in the vessel it's stored than on the subject it's poured. What that meant to me was all this hate and discontent and vitriol that I have within my heart and in my body is hurting me more than it's hurting the enemy. And so I have that choice. Again, I can choose whether or not this acid within me is going to kill me. And I kind of made a promise to myself after I heard that. I thought to myself, I think I'm going to live through this, but if I don't, if I die here, they have to spend some energy doing it. I'm not going to kill myself. That makes it too easy for the enemy. So if I die here, they got to work at it. I'm not going to kill myself. And so from that moment on, it seemed to me that, yes, I had the choice. I could smile every day, regardless of how things were working out. Um, and the other guys, ironically, when we all got back and we could see each other for the first time and compare notes, it was really surprising how many guys went through that same metamorphosis of of feeling put upon, of feeling down and out and negative, and it seemed like it took 3 to 6 months for all of us to realize that, hey, this wasn't hurting the enemy, it was hurting us. We better get on with it. And so collectively, we sort of we sort of taught each other, or at least supported each other in our positive thoughts and in ways that we could be better and not bitter.
Yeah.
And we did. Here, most of the guys came back. 90% of the prisoners of war in Vietnam came back and stayed in the military. We continued to fly airplanes and command fleets and battalions all over the world. From our number, we've produced 17 generals and 7 admirals. That's from 591 guys. Fairly small number got 591. We have doctors and lawyers and preachers and teachers. We have 2 United States senators, a vice presidential candidate, and a president's candidate. My old flight instructor, John McCain, I got to know him pretty well, just learning to fly airplanes. He taught me to fly jets. And then I ran into him. He was shot down 5 months after I was. And so we were in the same prison camp. And so we've done some really great things even after we came back from the prison, which I think is living proof, that adversity is a horrible thing to waste.
Bob sounds like an absolute legend. Did you ever have that conversation with him where you asked him, where did he find his own strength to send you those quotes and those bits of information and those, Bible recites and stuff? Because it just sounds to me like that was someone who was going through the same experience, but he found energy and purpose in supporting you and those around him. Did you ever have that conversation with him and see where his head was at in that whole thing and how he got through it?
Absolutely. In fact, I had that conversation with him several times a year. Okay. In fact, I'm going out. He has been elected to the Hall of Fame in the Aeronautical Hall of Fame. He's an admiral. He made admiral.
Wow.
And he came back and continued to fly. And so I'm going out. I'll be keynoting the presentation where he receives this award in November in Virginia. So yeah, I see Bob Shoemaker, talk to him at least once a month, and I thank him again because I really feel like he saved my life. And I asked him, how in the world did you figure that out? Well, he had been in that storeroom, and so he knew the position of the shovels and ropes and stuff in this. And then he gathered little pieces of wire that he could find around the camp and twist them together. Now, see, this is over a 2-year period. And he fished the wire over the boxes, around the shovels, and through the ropes, and finally into the hole. And he had been in my cell as a prisoner for a while, so he knew what the hole was, and it was just a matter of fishing that wire through there and getting it into that hole. But each time he did this, it would take him an hour, and of course he had to be. If the guard came, he had to pull the wire back into his cell. But it was just phenomenal. But the thing that's difficult to understand in all of my experience, because, and people ask me, well, because I learned several thousand lines of poetry that guys would pass around, I made poems of my own and sang songs of my own. And people say, well, how did you do all that? But the secret is this: when you have 24/7 with nothing else to do, no distractions. I mean, think of the distractions that we all have in our lives. The sounds and sights and smells and all the senses and all the stuff just bombards us on a daily basis. Shut all of that off. You might hear a bird that was the highlight of your day, was to hear a bird tweet outside your prison cell. And the rest of the time you're making stuff up in your mind. You're going back through your entire life and trying to remember every book you'd ever read, every movie you'd ever seen, every girl you'd ever dated. And that's what goes on in your mind when you have nothing else to do.
Wow. Crikey. Was it, I mean, I can imagine spending 6 years in a place like that as almost borderline impossible. But, I always said from my tennis and sports career and stuff that we're very adaptable. And, whether you go to a hotter country or a colder country, our bodies adapt and our minds do too. If we facilitate that adaptation, did it get easier? What years were the hardest?
Yeah, it got easier. I mean, I guess the first 2 or 3 years were the toughest part. But it's like anything else. It's like playing tennis, or airsoft or anything else. You learn and you put it a step at a time, and you learn, and then you fail, and you relearn, and you fail, and you learn again, and so you have these plateaus of learning. But the important part is you have to be willing to fail, I think, to learn. And so, yeah, actually, the torture stopped after I was there about 4 years, primarily because our wives were back here petitioning our government and governments around the world. They went to embassies and consulates around the world and tried to force our friendly governments to put pressure on the North Vietnamese, stop torturing my husband. And it worked. And so the enemy saw that we had value, and they better keep us alive, and they better treat us better. And so after 4 years, the torture stopped for the most part, and they gave us better food and even allowed us into larger rooms and outside once in a while. So treatment improved after 4 years. And obviously it still wasn't a real happy place because we still had no communication with the outside world, but things got better.
So did your family know that you were alive? When did they find out? What happened?
I was listed as missing in action at first, but I was shot down on the birthday of their president. Ho Chi Minh was their president. And I was shot down on the 19th of May, which was his birthday. And so they celebrated his birthday by giving me to the president as a war prize. Here's a captured American. Happy birthday to you.
Oh
So
my God.
now I was of course blindfolded, and I never saw him. I never even knew what was happening, except that I could hear cheering and loud crowds, and all this stuff was going on. Well, a journalist from some Eastern European country took a picture of me, and it funneled through the intelligence for 2 years. But it was 2 years after I was shot down that my parents and my wife at the time saw that picture, and knew that I was alive. So then, when the treatment got better, I got to write a postcard home. It was just a little 6-line postcard, but I got to write it out, and they edited it by taking a pair of scissors and cut out about every fourth or fifth word just to make it weird. But it did get home, and so they knew that that I was alive, and and they, I mean, of course, they never knew from one day to the other what shape I was in, but they knew I was alive.
My God. I know it's probably a very personal thing and probably touches a few heartstrings and stuff, but I've got to ask, after all of that happened and all of that time apart and stuff, what do you write in 6 lines after all of that happens to your family? What do you write?
Well, first of all, the enemy told us what to write, and to talk about the good food and the good care and what a good time I was having. So
Yes,
that,
spa resort retreat.
yeah, exactly. But I could put in some little code words in there that they knew that that I was being forced. to write these words. And so they figured that out. Now, at the time, we had some top secret stuff. It's all been unclassified now, but I can talk about it. But I had a code where if I could ever write home, I could put certain letters in certain words and spell out the names of the guys that are missing in action. Because a lot of those guys were, their families did not know that they were alive. Now, my family knew after that picture was taken that I was alive, but a lot of guys, families didn't know. And so I put I put their names into this postcard. Well, a lot of it was cut out, so a lot of never really got to the fruition there. But because I was trying to put these letters into certain words, then a lot of it didn't seem to make a lot of sense, to my wife. And then when the American intelligence looked at it, they were not allowed to tell her that there was a code in here. Well, so she took the letter to a graphologist, a handwriting expert, and they said, "Hey, this guy's crazy. This guy's in the corner of some prison camp somewhere, and he's never going to be normal again." So my poor wife had this burden now that they're telling her that I would never be normal. And so she held on for 5 years, and in 3 months before I came home, she filed for divorce. She was engaged to another guy when I came home. So, just one more challenge in your life, one after another. And as I say, you don't lose, you learn. And I had learned from that 8-inch box that, hey, I still had control. I still could make decisions. And I decided to get on with my life and pick out the positive parts. And there are lots of positive parts of being a prisoner of war or any adversity in life. And you see, what I maintain is, and your point, Louis, was that, hey, you couldn't even imagine spending 6 years in a prison camp, and I understand that, but you've been through some experience that I couldn't imagine. After I speak, ladies will come up to me and say, "Boy, I could never go through what you went through," and I would say, "Have you been through childbirth?" Yeah, I have 3 kids, and I've been through childbirth. I said, I've watched childbirth, and I can guarantee you, I could never go through that. So it's all relative. It's all relative, the things you go through. So I think if you've ever been lonely, if you've ever been bored, if you've ever been put upon, if you've ever failed in your mission, see, because that was a big deal to me, was I had failed in my mission, and I felt very guilty and shameful about that. Have you ever had your baseline value system challenged? Well, we all have. That's part of life. And so those were the big challenges that I went through, and the big challenges I think that everybody goes through. And so you feel, well, if I can survive and even thrive through this experience, what do you need? What do you need to survive? And so that's kind of the basis of my message.
Does it not frustrate you when you see people nowadays taking life for granted, or people who are these first world problems, and the people who are complaining, and they've got stuff so good, and they've got a roof over their heads and the food on the table, and everything's wrong, and there's always a problem, they're never happy? Does that not frustrate you after being through something like that, or how do you view that?
You're absolutely right. It frustrates me. I'll never forget when I first came home, being divorced, and I had a date with this girl, and we went out, and she ordered a steak. She said medium rare, and it came out medium, and she sent the steak back. Man, I almost followed the waiter taking it back. Man, it looked like a beautiful steak to me. And so, yes, I get frustrated when people take such small things and make big deals out of them, because they really aren't. The 99% of all of our problems in life are just minuscule. So now I don't say that to people. I bite my lip sometimes, and because I want to say, hey, get over it, man. but I understand that's human nature, and especially kids. We have 4 kids and 4 grandkids now, and to watch them go through this process of blame, of defeatists, um, of uh, of lack of trust, and you think, boy, I wish I could give them a pill. Wish I could make them a prisoner of war just for a day or two, to learn some of this stuff. Um, so, but eventually we all learn it. It just sometimes it takes a while.
You can't tell a person, can you? You can't kind of you can't impose that by telling them that they need to do this or that life's easy, can you?
Nope.
How can you, if you're,
Nope.
I don't know, if I guess kind of what I wanted to ask, but it's a difficult question to ask, but how can we kind of get that appreciation a bit more nowadays? Like if you're speaking to me or someone a bit younger who is like that, obviously we're not going to be shipped off to Vietnam to go into a prison camp for a day and experience it, but how can we kind of develop a bit of that, I don't know, whatever it is you need to understand what you guys would have gone through and how good life is right now? Where does that begin? Is it gratitude? What is it?
First of all, I just want to tell you that I really appreciate who you are and what you've done and what you're going to be doing in life. You're such a young guy, because most of the people your age that I talk to really have no feel. They have no sense, of the value of experience, and I don't know if it's our education system or what, but anyway, I salute you, Louis, about being a kind of a guy I think that understands what I'm talking about.
Thank you, sir.
I can see it in your eyes that you understand me, and I don't know, if that's your growing up as an only child, or your tennis, or whatever it is, but you have figured this out, and I salute you for it.
Thank
Now,
you.
but what do you say? What do you say? Well, first of all, I I try not to say a whole lot, but to be an example. And I think when people hear my story and then see me living the life that I live, they look at this and they wonder, why is this guy not drooling from his mouth? He's 81 years old and he went through 6 years in a prison camp. But he's out there on his mountain bike and he's out there skiing and climbing mountains and riding horses. And I hope that by example, people see that, and I don't have to tell them that anybody can do this, with just a simple philosophy of, of self-confidence. And so, but it's not easy, it's not, I mean, you see this, in your podcast, I'm sure you have people that they just can't understand, this is just so far, and I'm speaking now to people that are sometimes 2 and 3 generations behind me, as you are. Your music is different, your humor is different, your words are different, your technology, everything is different, So where do you find that common level, where you can talk? Well, we're all human, we're all citizens of this globe, and so we all have those same kinds of challenges. And so how do you face the challenge?
Quick ad break here, guys. Just want to introduce you to Shopify. Shopify is the all-in-one e-commerce platform that runs basically everything I'm doing, from my personal website to my business websites. It truly is a phenomenal system, and I have a way for you guys to get started today for just £1 building your business, whether that's personal brand, whether that's e-commerce, whether that's a blog. It has everything. It has its own app store that can get you basically every feature you could expect from an online store, and it really just works out of a fantastic all-in-one system, which I can only highly recommend enough. And you guys can start for just £1 today. It's an incredible offer. Absolutely amazing. And the link to that is in the bio, or I'll put it up in the tab at the top. I think it'll be top right at the screen for you guys right now. So yeah, guys, check it out. Make sure to get this offer and yeah, get started. It's fantastic. Yeah. Wow. I mean, I really appreciate what you said. It's a great honor to hear that. But if I'm honest with you, I often have those days where I get down about the little things and the small things, and I feel like sometimes I don't appreciate everything that's around me, and I have to remind myself of that. But I think if there's anything that I could say that after listening to your story, and there's anything I could say about my own experience in these situations too, is that it's always a personal choice. Now, you could have had, my parents who brought me up in a great way, I feel, or my tennis career, which laid a load of foundations for morals and ethics and hard work and sportsmanship, which is very important, or speaking to people like yourself in the podcast and stuff. But I feel like it's always been a choice that you make consciously, regardless of, you could have everything. You could have everything in place to be mentally strong and appreciate these things and take life and grasp it. But if you don't make the choice to do it, you're never going to be happy. And my dad always said, you can take the horse to the water, but you can't make it drink. So I think that's
take
what
a
I was
drink. I got that early on too. I do a podcast, and in fact, the last one that I did, I said, what's the connection between success and happiness? Because we all see a lot of people that are wildly successful, and they are some of the most unhappy people on earth.
So true.
I took my family to Africa. I have what I call ski trips for my kids and grandkids. SKI, spend the kids' inheritance. That's what I try to do.
I love it. That's brilliant.
Yeah, and so I took them to Africa, and we went out in the Serengeti and visited some of these Maasai tribes. These folks live in huts made from cow dung. They have nothing. They have a loincloth. Their toys are sticks and rocks, and yet they're some of the happiest kids on earth. You think, okay, man, they by our standards would not be considered successful, but oh, by the way, they are happy. So success and happiness really don't always have a common bond. So we can try to be successful, and I think we all do. But oh, by the way, don't forget, you got to try to be happy.
I think that's hilarious. I said something very similar the other day to someone. I can't remember who it was, but I think I said to them, "My God, I promise you right now, there's a fisherman right now on the Amazon or some river out there in a very poor country. He's got his, wooden fishing rod in his hand, and there's an alligator swimming around the boat, and he is the happiest person on the planet right now with what he's got." It's just so true, isn't it?
It's really true.
But what do you think, in terms of that? Do you feel like we sometimes have to lose what we've got to appreciate it, or do you think we can find that appreciation in by just doing something every day? How do we do that?
I think it's all in your mindset. Sometimes it takes a jolt, I think, in your mind to prove that there's value, in the challenge that you face. But see, I think you are way ahead of the game, just understanding that this works, and that when you get down, you think about, okay, I can make it through this. I've done this before. I've played this game. And if it is, in fact, all in my head, if this is a mental process, man, I'm way ahead of the game. I can do this. And so it's that self-confidence, I think, that you have to have. And if you can, if you can develop that in young people, or old people, just the whole idea that you still have a choice, and regardless of how tough life gets, and what kind of slings and arrows that thrown at you, you still have a choice.
So true, so true. Let's finish off the story then. So I know we're running along with this one, but we've got to finish it. We've got to have closure. So how did you eventually get out? How did you get out of there in the end, and what happened after?
Sure. A peace treaty was signed in early 1973, and part of the peace treaty was trading prisoners. We had about 10,000 of them. They had 591 of us, and so there was a prisoner exchange over about 2 months. And so I was in the second plane out of there, and flew into Clark Air Force Base in the Philippines, where I sat down with a psychiatrist, okay, because they thought we would be zombies, we would be idiots going through an experience like that. They had a preconceived condition of all of us that we would need some mental process. And so I sat down with a psychiatrist, and that's when I learned that my wife had filed for divorce. And he said, "Well, aren't you angry about this?" I said, "Oh, I'm very disappointed. I was really planning on spending the rest of my life with her. But oh, by the way, I've just been set free, for the first time in my life, at least in the last 6 years. I got a doorknob on the inside of my door. I can walk out into sunlight, man. And so I'm really a pretty happy guy. Yes, I'm disappointed that my plans for the future, but and the psychiatrist said, he said, it's been my experience. I want to tell you that you need to show some physical anger. So I want you to go back to your hotel room, your hospital room, and pound on the door and kick it in, tear up the pillows, yell and scream. It's okay to show some physical emotion because of the challenge you just. He said, you have the right to be bitter. I said, Doc, I have the right to have diarrhea. I choose not to be bitter. Thank you very much. He couldn't understand that I saw life, as freedom for the first time for a long time. And I was going to grab this freedom, and get on with my life, which I did. And so did the other guys, it's been incredible how well we have done over the years, and how we have survived and even thrived through that experience. And like I say, statistically, they tell us we're healthier mentally and physically than the fighter pilots who weren't shot down and captured and tortured. And so that, again, I think validates my principle that getting blown out of the sky can actually be good for you. That the adversity in your life has some value in it if you find it.
Wow. That's a real, real impactful one. I mean, what an incredible talk. My mind is blown. I can only thank you for this, but I just want to kind of round this off with one more question then. So, we've been speaking for just over an hour now, and it's a lot for people to digest. And I think, it's a hell of a story, and we've gone over a lot of points and stuff. And if there was just one thing that you could say you hope everyone takes away from this, so even if it isn't the whole talk, or if it wasn't too many things, if there was just one most important point that we've gone over today that you think people could take away from this and apply into their lives, what do you feel like or hope that would be?
I think it's pretty simple. And the message is you have a choice. You really do have a choice. And when you think you don't have a choice, look for the choice. You've got one. There there are maneuvers. I think in a lot of cases we go through a challenging situation, we feel we're boxed in. There's no way out. You're in this 8-inch mental prison, but you have a choice. You can free yourself from that prison of distress. So I think that would be it. You have a choice, guaranteed.
There we go. Well, I know that there's going to be a ton of people listening to this who want to see more of you and go to an engagement or just get more of you, basically. Then, so I mean, that's been the 4 questions I've noted down for today. And before we wrap it up, we always have a shameless plug moment. So, send these people who are listening in right now over to everything that you're working on, or the things that you want people to take a look at, or anything you believe in. Floor is yours. Just send them wherever you think's best.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate that. My website, charlieplumb.com. It's CharliePlumb.com. Has all the information you could ever want on me and my story. I wrote my autobiography when I first came home from Vietnam. It's in its 34th printing. It's called I'm No Hero. And it lays out all the stories and the philosophies that I've mentioned here today. I do a weekly podcast on Pantheon, but that's in my website also. And I respond to every email that's sent to me. I know you try to do that too, and sometimes it's a problem because you get a lot of emails.
Yeah.
But I don't use anybody else to try to be Charlie Plumb. I'm the only one, and so I try to answer all the emails that I'm in. So I continue to speak, and I've spoken about 5,000 times in every state in the U.S. and 24 foreign countries, and so I'm hired by corporations and trade associations and schools and churches and all over. So I feel like that's my mission. While I was in the military, my mission was to defend the Constitution, and now my mission, I think, is to spread the good news of grit, of adversity, of resilience.
Fantastic. The last question I have for today before we finish this up then is a new show tradition that I like to ask to all the guests. But if you had that moment now and you found a young Charlie Plumb running around the streets outside your house, and you kind of had a snapshot back to the future moment, and you had a minute to whisper something in his ear, what would you tell a young you with everything you've been through?
My mother tried to teach me to forgive. She was a great Christian lady, and she never had a bad word about anybody. And I remember as a kid, I was saying, Mom, that woman just offended you. Don't you talk back to her? Don't you say something? No. You got to forgive. And obviously, it is a good Christian principle, but I found that it's also a survival principle that if you can't forgive people for the wrongdoings that you perceive that they've had, then you harbor this thing within you. It's back to the vitriol, the acid within you is more harmful than being bitter against somebody. So I think that's what I would whisper in the ear of a young person is learn to forgive. And I try to spend my life, just forgiving other people, because you don't know what they're going through. And lots of times you don't want to know because they got it worse than you do.
Yeah, there we go. Well, Charlie, I'm sad this has come to an end. It's been such a great talk, but honestly, I'm honored.
Okay.
I thank you so much for joining me today for this podcast. It has been beyond a pleasure having you on, and I want to speak to you again in the future. It's something we've got to do again. Absolutely.
All right. We'll do it again, Louis. Great to be with you, my friend. And I salute you absolutely for all the stuff that you do well.
I salute you.
Spread the word.
I certainly will. I'll get this out there. And thank you guys for listening. This has been episode 121. If you'd like to listen to the past episodes, go and have a look at the channel. If you'd like to listen in for the future ones, make sure to hit the subscribe button and spread some love by leaving a like and a comment. Signing off for now. Bites on. See you next time. Good night.